What is happening, guys? Scotty Plays here, bringing you another Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel video. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing another Spright deck profile. I know I just did one of these a few days ago. It was the pure, quote-unquote, pure Spright. Bunch of hand traps, swap frogs, beckoning bees, diva, beaver, whichever normal summon you want to play. Yeah, but this time I'm going to be bringing you a different kind of Spright deck list. This is going to be Runic Spright. Everybody's favorite deck. So, for those of you who have been living under a rock, Runic is kind of the worst thing ever in Master Duel currently. Usually it's just playing a bunch of floodgates, such as Skill Drain, Goes and Match, Rivalry, TC Boo, so on and so forth. And it's just absolutely toxic. Runic Stun, where you're just milling your opponent out, locking down floodgates. This is a bit different. It's going to be Spright Runic. And what the goal of this deck is to abuse the Runic engine for interruptions in the form of Freezing Curses, which is a monster negate, Flashing Fire, which destroys a special summon monster, Destruction, which pops back row, Slumber, which prevents monsters from attacking or prevents monsters from being destroyed, or prevents monsters from being destroyed, as well as giving you a really neat rank 2/level 2 engine to pair up with your sprites, and also just draw a bunch of cards off of Runic Fountain to get your engine rolling. So it's a really cool deck. I like it a lot more than Runic Stun, and I don't think it's nearly as toxic. So without further ado, let's jump right into the deck profile. Of course, this is not going to be a finalized, perfect list. Sprite's not even out in Master Duel yet, so there's going to be a lot of experimentation that needs to be done with the Master Duel meta. But this is a good starting point, I think, for this deck. So let's get right into it. Starting off with the hand traps, of course, playing 3 Maxis, 3 Ash Blossoms, 2 Call by the Graves, and 1 Cross the Designator. Even though this is a much less hand trap focused deck, these cards I think are still going to be mandatory, right? You're going to still want to have Maxis in your deck. For one, because it's level 2, it can work with your sprites. Also, it can, completely just end your opponent's turn. And it does that, I think, more effectively than a card like Lava Golem, which I am mentioning down here. But I think, overall, Maxi's going to be a better card. In the current format, I hope I don't eat my words too much with that. But I think Maxi's going to, slightly edge out a card like Lava Golem. Whereas in the TCG, Lava Golem was played in this deck, right? Then, of course, Ash Blossom. Why do you play Ash Blossom? It's not going to be that amazing in this format, but it stops Maxi, and Maxi hurts all the Spright variants, including the one we're looking at right now. So playing these Ash Blossoms is going to be another out to Maxi that you are absolutely going to need when you're playing on the ladder or in tournaments, whatever it might be. I could be wrong with this deck specifically, but I do think these will be probably still mandatory even in a deck like this. Then, of course, the 2 called bys, the 1 cross out, the standard stuff. This needs to be in pretty much every single deck in Master Duel, especially decks that play these cards. Moving on to the Spright engine, we're playing 3 blues, 2 Jet. Of course, this is the Master Duel ban list, so Jet is not limited to 1. It's unlimited in this format. We can play 3 of them. This is, of course, on Dueling Book, as always, for my deck profiles, because I like it a little bit more. And the OCG has this limited to 1, but that's closest to Master Duel. So that's why it's saying 1 here, when really starters at 2 and Jets at 3 in Master Duel. Just putting that out there for anyone who's new to my channel or new to Master Duel, whatever it might be. But I'm playing 3 blues and 2 Jets. The reason being is because you don't necessarily need the full Spright engine in this deck to, fully just go off on your opponent. You draw so many cards in a deck like this that you're going to be drawing your Spright cards more consistently than you would be in a pure Spright deck. So that's another factor. Also, throughout the little bit of testing I've been able to do, which, albeit is not as much as I want to be able to do with this new format, I've noticed that 16 Runic spells is pretty much the bare minimum you can be playing. And in order to keep this deck at 40 and play 16, I had to make a cut somewhere. And I didn't know what to cut other than Jet. Again, this could change in the future. I might swap some other stuff around, but right now I'm working with 3 blue, 2 Jet, 1 red, and 1 carrot for our negates. And yeah, it seems like in this deck, the consistency of seeing your Spright cards is nowhere near as big of a deal as it is in a more pure variant. So take that for what you will. But this could be incorrect. We do want to spend some more time testing and see what ends up being right with this ratio. Then, of course, we got 2 starters because it's semi-limited, unfortunately. 1 smashers. I think this card's still mandatory in a deck like this because it's one of the most versatile interruptions in the Spright deck. And even a deck like Runic Spright, which does have a more, wide array of interruptions can still benefit greatly from a card like this. Then for the normal, quote-unquote normal summons, we've got the Hyperia, the Capshell, and the Wind-Up Kitten. Any of these can be summoned off of the Gigantic Sprite and are absolutely phenomenal. The Hyperia, basically when this card is summoned, you draw a card. Capshell, when it's sent to the graveyard for a Link, a Fusion, Synchro, you draw a card, or if it's detached from an XYZ material to activate a monster effect, you can draw one card. So the reason you play these in this deck over something like the Frogs, over something like the Swap Frogs, is simply because a deck like this needs multiple, types of cards in its hand. You need to see both your Spright engine and your Runic engine for this variation to be good. Because if you only see Spright cards, you're playing a worse version of Spright than pure Spright. If you only see Runic cards, you're seeing a worse version of Runic Stun, pure Runic. So the Capshell and the Hyperia, they enable you to draw 2 cards on your turn in addition to your potential 2 or 3 draws off Fountain, and they allow you to draw cards in your opponent's turn, which then can draw into more Runic cards, which will be more interruptions or more draws. Whereas the Swap Frog, this is just for extension play and extra bodies to be put on the board to make more links, more exceeds, stuff like that, and potentially search Max C. But in this deck, it just doesn't seem to work as well as it does in the more pure variation. I've tested the Frogs in this version instead of the Capshell, Hyperia, Kitten, stuff like that, and I just like the Hyperia, the draw power more. Again, this is all subject to change. This is a brand new deck. It's not even in the game yet. It's coming out tonight at the time recording. I'm recording this at 8 o'clock at night, and the update's in 3 hours. So it'll be out in the game really, really soon. But I think that right now, the Hyperia and the Capshell is going to be the way to go. Of course, there could be questions about how do you spell it? Dark Beckoning Beast. The Dark Beckoning Beast, the Deep Sea Diva, the Beaver, these are being played in the more pure variation. Why are they not being played in this one? Well, it's really for the same reason. You don't need that same level like body extension in a deck like this, because all of your spell cards count as engine, and they put bodies on the board for you, right? The ability to, you can theoretically summon Hugin 3 times in a turn, and that counts as 3 level 2 bodies for you. So it really kind of replaces the fact of Dark Beckoning Beast, Beaver, Diva, that all just spam bodies out on the board. Instead, it's nice to just have that additional draw power to then get your multiple engines rolling throughout the course of the deck. I hope I explained that good for everybody. If anyone's got more questions about it, please leave them in the comment section below. I can try to answer them. Maybe someone who's a little bit more educated on the deck, maybe they played it in TCG, OCG, they can also chime in and help. But just through the little bit of testing I've done, this is what I've been seeing, just from my perspective. So that's just my reasoning there. As far as Kitten goes, I think this card's probably going to be mandatory in the deck. And the reason being is because this card is just a free out to almost anything in the game, right? You just can target one monster your opponent controls, return that target to the hand, and you can only use the effect of this. This effect can only be used once while this card is face up on the field. So the reason I'm saying this is mandatory is because going second, this deck is way worse, in my opinion, than pure Spright. The reason being is because pure Spright, as I showed in my video the other day, can play 14 plus hand traps. Really, okay, well, I'll say 10 or more hand traps. 10 to 15 hand traps can be played in the pure Spright variation. I'm on 14 personally. Whereas in this version of the deck, I'm on 6. I'm playing 3 Max Cs, 3 Ash Blossoms. That's it. No more going second cards, really. Some of the Runic cards can dub over as going second cards, but a lot of times, initially, you need them to put a Hugin on the board to A, get your Fountain to your hand, and B, to create level 2/rank 2/link 2 plays with your Spright cards. So a card like Wind Up Kitten, if you draw it, you can just normal summon it out, bounce something, force a negate, whatever it might be, then you can link off with it, exceed with it, and get into the graveyard somehow, and then bring it back with Spright Elf, and then summon it back out. So link off, make Spright Elf, bring the Kitten back out, use its effect again, because it reads that this effect can only be used once while this card is face up on the field. So if it leaves the field and then comes back, you can use its effect again, making it really, really good in a deck like this, and Spright in general is really good. It could even be a tech option in pure Spright, or a side deck card in pure Spright, whereas in Runic Spright I think it's a great main deck option, especially in best of one, because you can recycle it, It acts as a going second card. It can be summoned, it can just be summoned off Gigantic. It can be summoned back on the field with Elf. It's just got a lot of versatility. So that's my reasoning for that. Again, all this stuff is subject to change, but these are just my initial thoughts. This is a very complicated deck to build. It might not look like it, but the math on it is very complicated with all the Runic cards and balancing the Spright cards and actually wanting to play hand traps, so on and so forth. So the deck building can get a little tricky. So I hope my reasonings are all making good sense. As far as the Runic cards go, the majority of the deck, it's going to be 3 Runic Tips. Obviously, this is your generic Searcher. 3 Freezing Curses, your Monster Negate. 3 Flashing Fire, your Pop, Monster Destruction. 3 Runic Destruction, your Spell and Trap card Destruction. 2 Runic Slumbers. 1 Dispelling and 1 Smithing. Theoretically, you could play a Runic Droplet. Oh, spelled that wrong. Is it really not called? Oh, Golden Droplet. Theoretically, you play a Droplet instead of another Slumber if you wanted to just diversify the names, but I actually think Droplet's a really bad card. I don't think this card is that good. I know it's the benefit of this card is that you can play it regardless of your game board, of your board state, whether you have a Hugin or a Gary in your extra monster zone or like a Sprite Elf or whatever might be in your extra monster zone, you can always play your Droplet, which is really, really nice. But I don't think that giving your opponent a free draw is worth it just to be able to play in a board state that you probably miscalculated. That might not be a fair assessment because sometimes it's not under your control. But overall, through my testing, I've never really been in a situation where I needed to play a Runic card to summon out a Hugin when I couldn't, and it wasn't because I misplayed or something along those lines, or just haven't been playing it right. So, again, that's just my 2 cents. But if you want to play another name, definitely just drop a Slumber for it. Slumber is the next best one after all the 3 ofs. It's slightly better than Dispelling, I think. Depends. I think it's slightly better than Dispelling, and I think it's slightly better than Storm, and way better than Droplet. But again, just my opinion. So yeah, 2 Slumber. Of course, this protects a monster from being destroyed by battle or card effect, and it also makes that monster so it can't attack the rest of the turn. Dispelling, this when your opponent adds a card from the deck to the hand, it rips 1. And then Smithing, of course, this just banishes cards your opponent controls up to the number of cards they control. Banishes cards from the top of your opponent's deck up to the number of cards they control. Then, of course, Fountain's the most broken card ever. Not really going to talk about this one. You guys all know what these cards do for the most part, I think. But anyways, that is it for the main deck. Let's move on to some tech options. The cards down here in the side deck. Lava Golem. This is probably going to be played a lot in Spright. The reason I'm not playing it is because, 1, it's not good going first. And you want to go first in a deck like this. 2, it's not as good as Maxi, I don't think. And I think Maxi just requires more cards to play in the main deck. And even though it requires more cards, it's still better. So I'd rather play the 6 cards, 7 cards required for Maxi, the 3, 6, 7 here, because you're going to play these regardless. But these 7, I'd rather play all 7 of these than 3 Lava Golems, to be honest. I would rather take that quote-unquote L to play Maxi and play around Maxi. But that's just my 2 cents. This could be wrong. You could always play another Hyperia. Not bad to have more normal summons. You could always play another Jet. You could always play Pixies if you want. You could always play more Slumbers, Droplet like I mentioned before. More Runic cards if you want. I wouldn't recommend going over 40, but if you have to, it's not the worst thing in the world. And those are some options. And of course, you could always play a 3rd Elf in the extra deck. But anyways, moving now on to the extra deck. I am playing triple Hugin, 1 Gary. I think this is the proper lineup. Munin is really, really good, and I wish I had room for it. But I think 3 Hugin is better than 2 Hugin, 1 Munin. That's a tongue twister. But anyways, I think the 3 Hugin is necessary. Because a lot of times in my testing, I've been summoning 2 Hugin on my first turn if I go uninterrupted. That's a lot. That means you're only going to have 1 more for the rest of the game. And potentially 0 if you're only playing 2. It kind of limits your first turn a little bit more if you play 2 Hugins, where 2 Hugins might, in the long run, it might turn out that 2 Hugins is correct, and I just have to learn how to play the deck better. That's totally a potential. But right now, I'm feeling like 3 Hugin is correct because it is nice to be able to continually spam those bodies onto the board and just make an almost unbreakable turn 1 board with the Runic engine rolling. So Again, that's just what I'm thinking. The 1 Gary to recycle your fountain, also to pop cards potentially. Very good. 2 Gigantic. This doesn't really need any explanation. This card's insane. 1 Djinn, 1 Soul Sweeper just to out some stuff. 1 Mannequin Cat. It's potentially a really, really good way to end on your board, but this does kind of require side deck stuff, right? Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes this requires side deck stuff, so it's risky to go for this game 1 if you don't know what you're playing against, but it's always not a bad option, especially in game 2 or 3 if you're playing in a best of 3 tournament with side deck, so on and so forth. Then, of course, 2 Spright Elf. I don't think you need 3 in a deck like this, but I think 3 is a good option. If you have the extra deck space, let's say you want to drop the, Yugioh, let's say you want to drop Mannequin Cat, and you want to, fit some other stuff in here, another Elf is great. But I don't necessarily think it's necessary. Well, it's great English. I don't think it's necessary to play 3 of this. I think 2 is perfectly fine, and in grind games, you should be good, because you're going to be making 1 of these on turn 1, and at worst, 1 on turn 3, hopefully not until turn 5, though, if your opponent's able to out it. But, also, I guess you could theoretically be making it on turn 3, because then you link off with IP on turn 2, go into an Avermax, then the next turn make another Spright Elf. So yeah, I could see that. Kind of scratch what I just said. Probably got to make this in the first 2 turns, but we'll see. Then of course the 1 IP, this is part of the inboard. 1 Dark, this card's insane. It's really good against Spright because a lot of these guys are darks and you can steal them. 1 Unicorn for IP plays and 1 Avermax for IP plays, because why be scared of Despia, obviously. Anyways, that is going to do it for the deck profile. Let's go ahead and jump over into some test hands. I'm not going to be doing combos because this deck is a lot more freestyle than something like the previous iteration of Spright is, where it's more hand trap Spright, it's more pure Spright. You're going to be doing very linear things every single game. Whereas in this game, like in this, you're still going to be doing linear things, but it's not as consistent that you're going to be doing the same thing over and over. A lot of times your hands are kind of makeshift, and you kind of have to just craft stuff as you go, because you're going to be drawing a lot of cards, you're going to be drawing awkward formations of cards. Not that they're bad, just that they're a little awkward. So let's jump right on in. Going to start off here with a Flashing Fire to summon. Of course, summon out the Yugioh. You can effect discard 1 of the Ash Blossoms, go search the fountain. Of course, we don't have any other Runic cards in our hand right now, but that's not going to stop me from getting the fountain, because there's a really good chance we draw onto one. Summon out the Jet. Jet effect can activate to go search the starter. Theoretically, if you don't have Smashers, you can search it here. I don't think with this hand it would have been correct. Replace this with a Maxi. I don't think it's correct to search the Smashers in that situation. I think it's still correct to search the starter and get your Spright engine rolling. But, there's plenty of options depending on the type of hand you get. We're then going to starter, summon out Blue. Pay our life points, pay our 1100 for the starters. Blue effect's going to activate, go search the red. Gonna go ahead and summon the red out to play around more hand traps. Exceed into the Gigantic. You want to use the Yugioh for 2 reasons. 1, because it opens that extra monster zone for another Yugioh to be summoned or an elf to be summoned there. And also because Spright Elf, where does it say this? The original attack of this card that has a fusion, synchro, exceed, or link as material becomes doubled. So this, because it's got Yugioh under, it becomes 3200 attack, which makes it an Eradicator. Let's look that up. Oh, sorry, I cannot spell. If I can spell. So it makes it so Eradicator Epidemic Virus, which I should have probably mentioned earlier for tech cards, becomes viable with the Gigantic, because it's tribute 1 dark monster with 2500 or more attack, blah blah blah. So it instantly makes this an Eradicator target, and also it's just, stronger. Like, why not make a monster stronger unless, why not, right? We're then going to Gigantic, summon out the Hyperia. Hyperia's effect's going to draw us a card. Nice, we drew into a Runic card. That's absolutely amazing. Activate that fountain, activate the Freezing Curses to summon out another Yugioh. We're not going to be using the Yugioh effect this time. Then we're going to activate the fountain to shuffle back the Freezing, or not the shuffle, but put the Freezing Curses and Flashing Fire back on the bottom of the deck to draw 2 cards. That's awesome. We drew into another Runic card for next turn, and we drew into a starter for follow-up. We're then going to link off the Hyperia and the Yugioh into an Elf. Elf's effect is going to activate to summon back out just something from the graveyard. What I would recommend, depending on what you want to go for, is what you should summon back here. So if you want to go into a Djinn, you obviously have to go for Jet because it takes 2 dark monsters. If you want to Jet on your opponent's turn, you should go for Hyperia here. if you want to Hyperia on your opponent's turn, you should go for Jet here. So if you're going for like a Mannequin Cat play or an IP play, you should summon whichever level 2 target you don't want to summon on your next turn. The reason being, you want to play around Crow as best possible. So it's really difficult to say what's correct, because like it might be better to have a Jet in the graveyard regardless, but you know, it's hard to say. Anyways, of course, here you can make Jin, Mannequin Cat, or IP, whatever you want. We're just going to set those cards and pass. And this is an insane in board, right? We got Runic stuff kind of rolling. We have some follow-up here, because we drew into it, luckily. We got the IP into Avermax, the Monster Negate with red, follow-up with Gigantic if it lives, follow-up with Elf's effect to summon something back out. We can either draw cards off Hyperia, summon back the blue or Jet and search. Absolutely wonderful in board. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to another one really quickly. This hand, it's more of like it's a heavy Runic hand, so let's see what happens. We're going to start off with, not with the Fountain, my bad. Start off with Slumber effect, summon out. In this situation, I'm not going to use its effect because I already have Fountain. Then going to normal summon Max C. What a pro play. Going to Exceed into the Gigantic, because of course this doesn't take any sprites, it's just 2 level 2s. Then Gigantic effect, detach the Max C. Leave that Hugin attached, of course, for the attack boost. Summon out the blue, special summon out the Jet. Jet's effect's going to search here. We can either get Smashers or Starter. I went for Starter so I can play around hand traps a little bit better, even though they priority would have hand trapped us. Summon that red out into the field. Take our life points from the Starter, of course. Then going to activate the Fountain. Activate the Destruction to go summon out another Hugin. No effect, of course. Fountain effect, shuffle back the Destruction and the Storm to draw 2. Not shuffle back, put them on the bottom, my bad. Draw 2 into 2 more Runics for next turn. Absolutely awesome. Link off into the Elf. Elf effect, summon back out the Jet. Then you can either, of course, Exceed into Jin, go into Mannequin Cat, or go into IP, whatever you like. And then same end board. Nice and easy. Got another replay for you guys here. This is not the same one. My bad, I already showed you the end board. It's literally the exact same thing, so I'm actually just going to skip that one. Actually, no, we're not going to skip it. Why not? Might as well show some unedited content here. Going to start off with the Hyperia in this situation. Talk about this hand really quickly. It's not the best hand in the world. It's an interesting hand. Actually, no, that's not true. This is a really good hand. It's an interesting hand. Yeah, I'm just going to shut up. It's a good hand. Start off with the Hyperia, draw a card, summon out the Jet. Jet gets Starter. Starter, summon out the blue. Blue, search red. Sorry, I went kind of fast there. I was getting a little lazy when recording these. You'll just reveal that to say I've searched off the blue. They're going to summon out the red to play around with some hand traps. Activate the Destruction. Here, okay, so this technically just played right into Nib. I mean, it doesn't really play into Nib because we have red. But regardless of what I was going to do there, I was going to play into Nib unless I just wanted to not put red on the field. So theoretically what I could have done is take the Destruction back, take the Hugin back, take the red back into our hand, link with these 2 or something like that, or not link, Exceed with these 2 into Gigantic effect to, prevent anyone from summoning level 2s anymore. So then I can no longer get nibbed. But that plays into like Ghost Ogre. So what I decided to do was play around all that stuff, but kind of play around that stuff. Like it plays around it in the sense that they're going to Nibiru you, but you have to negate it with red. But taking that risk is better than just outright losing to a Veiler or to an Imperm, or not. No, you're going to lose to Imperm no matter what, unless you summon the carrot here, which I probably should have done. Hindsight 2020. But wait, what do I do here? I might discard. Need effect, of course. If you want to discard carrot, I won't be using. Oh yeah. So the reason I did it like this is so I could play around the hand traps more efficiently, right? So I could play around Veiler and Ghost Ogre as opposed to just playing around Nib. Really, I should have summoned carrot here to play around Imperm as well, but we're not going to talk about that. Sorry if that was a little confusing, but we're not going to talk about that. Summon Gigantic out, because like theoretically, like you might be saying, oh well, you locked your zones. I could have just put the Gigantic up here, and then summoned out the carrot, and then summoned out the cap shell, and then linked off with the Gigantic and the cap shell. So that would have been better because I would have played around Imperm, of course. But not all of us can be pro players, like me, who just made the misplay. They're going to link off into the Elf, summon out the carrot, link those two off into the IP. And for whatever reason, I didn't elf effect here. So theoretically, we're going to elf effect, bring back the carrot, and have another interruption on board. So that's actually a really good inboard, but I misplayed, and it looked really awkward. So apologies for that. Moving on to the next replay. The last two replays are starting with the exact same hand. And I just wanted to show two different iterations of how you can play it. Here is, I'm going to start with this one first, because I think this one's worse. Starting off, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to pause that. Starting off, we are going to, I lied, this is the good one. This is the bad one. Starting off with Hyperia. Hyperia's effect is going to use to draw a card, draw into max C. That's kind of insane. But that was lucky, that wasn't actually good, that was just luck. Summon out the Jet. Jet effect goes search starter. Activate starter, summon out blue. Pay our life points. Blue effect goes search the red to play around monster effects. Summon out the red. This is why Imperm is so good, because people are always going to search red, I think. And Imperm is just insane. Activate the fountain. Activate freezing curses to summon. Summon out the Yugioh, no effect, no need to. Exceed off into the gigantic effect, detach the Hyperia to go summon the Capshell from the deck. Link off, and we're not actually going to be linking off there, that was a mistake. We're going to be using the slumber effect here to go summon again. Then activate the fountain, of course, to draw 2 free cards, because, you know, free is free, and fair cards are fair. Draw into an Ash and a Flashing Fire, that's a really good draw. Link off those two into Elf. Capsule effect is going to be able to let us draw a card, draw into another Maxi, because I'm good at this game. Of course, here you can go for Mannequin Cat, Jin, IP, whatever you want. Then you're going to go into the IP. Then I haven't used Elf's effect, so just going to summon back the Capshell to use potentially with the IP on the follow-up turn, on my opponent's turn, to make a unicorn, something like that, to then draw a free card on my opponent's turn. So, yep. That is, in my opinion, the worst way to play this hand. This is, in my opinion, the better way to play it, I think, and that is to start off with the Runic cards. So we're going to activate Smithing to go summon out the Yugioh. We're going to activate Yugion's effect here to try to bait out a hand trap. Even if they don't hand trap you, it's still fine to have double fountain in your hand. It's really not that bad. We're going to discard the Hyperia because we can just summon it back later. It's really, really good. Then we're going to special summon out the Jet. Jet effect is going to activate to go search. Search that starter. Going to activate the starter to go summon blue. Blue effect, of course, is going to get us a good old search. Going to go search that red. Summon the red out, of course, as always. Exceed on up into gigantic effect after we use the fountain. Detach to go summon the Capshell. Activate the freezing curses. I think I said that right. Yep, the freezing curses. Go summon out Yugioh. Activate fountain effect. Shuffle back 2. Draw 2. We're then going to link off into an elf. Capshell effect is going to activate to draw another card. Activate elf to bring back Hyperia to draw another card because we haven't used it yet. And then we're going to link off into the IP. So this hand, the difference is we normal summoned, and we did not normal summon in this one, so we have 1 extra card in our hand, as opposed to the version I just deleted, which for whatever reason, oh, we lost connected, okay, my bad. Then the version I just deleted, the other version of the same exact hand, we end on a Capshell on board and 1 less card in hand. So, all things equal, I think this version's better, because it just ends with more cards in hand. It gives you more potential to have, not more potential, but it gives you like more diverse interruptions and more unknown cards for your opponent to have to play through, which I think is better. Granted, in the other example, I did draw Maxi plus Ash, which is kind of insane. But, you know, in this situation, we got Flashing Fire and Freezing Curses, which is also really, really good. You know, that's a monster negate, a monster pop. Like, who's complaining about that, right? Like, this is almost as good as you could get with a hand like this. Like, it's absolutely insane. So, anyways, I would show you guys the deck again, but I'm on a lost connection screen over here, so I'm just going to leave it on this screen here. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the video. That's going to do it for me. If you have any suggestions about the deck or anything, just let me know in the comment section below. If not, let me know what you think about this upcoming format. Is this going to be the best deck? I think this might be the best Spright version, but only time will tell. So, yep. That being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in the video. I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Enjoy playing Spright on release. Yeah. Peace.